The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the guests or hosts, and not necessarily those of the advertisers, networks, platforms, or stations. Warning that the content of the show may not be suitable for all audiences, and that viewer discretion is advised. The show does not intend to provide medical, legal, or financial advice, and viewers or listeners should consult with a professional before making any decisions based on the information presented.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey, and we are broadcasting from 300 feet deep in an abandoned nuclear missile silo somewhere lost in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of the Dakota Territories. And I am joined, as always, by the paranormal crime-fighting duo. Daisy and the Sundance Kid are in the house tonight in full force. They are working the door. It is a $10 cover and a 2-drink minimum, so be kind to your waitress this evening. And we're going to be talking about some really interesting stuff, as always. We're going to have a little bit of a, round discussion. We're going to start with our usual intelligence briefing on where we are, our current state in the upswing of the Kali Yuga, and then we're going to transition into a few interesting subtopics. One of those will be the keys to finding Bigfoot. That's something everyone's interested in, right? How do you finally prove the species to be real? And we'll get into an in-depth discussion on what it would take for that to occur. And I thought we would touch on, in lieu of the missing William Neal McCaslin, Major General William Neal McCaslin, who was the commander of the base where, if anything was recovered at Roswell, this is where it was stored. I'm talking about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base itself, where the bodies of the aliens and the wreckage that occurred at Roswell and the Trinity crash, now that we know about through the efforts of Dr. Jacques Vallée, are all housed there in underground vaults, and this guy would have been literally sitting right on top of it, and he knew all the deep, dark UFO secrets of the United States government. And let's face it, guys, somebody like that, you don't just get to retire and walk away into the sunset. There are nefarious elements at work in the United States government, and really not just in the government, but and I'm talking about the intelligence community itself more than anything, but also embedded from our intelligence communities into the aerospace companies. Now, that's where things get really murky and really deep and really dark really fast. Because what ended up happening was that after this alien technology was recovered, they began to piecemeal some of that out to aerospace companies in order to have them back engineer the technology. That got placed into what are called SAPs, or Special Access Programs. This is a hybrid, a monster, if you will, a hybrid program that combines government scientists and intelligence agents with aerospace personnel. Over time, many of those scientists and many of those CIA agents and many of the, let's call them darker elements of the intelligence community, people that are tasked with the wet work, if you will, are then go into private contract work when they get out of the government for these aerospace companies. Now, this group of people are widely, well, within my circles of paranormal and UFO researchers, are referred to as ex-protect. Ex-protect is probably responsible for the John F. Kennedy assassination. That's its own show, and we'll get to that at some point. But, yeah, so all of this ties into the fact that William Neal McCaslin has gone missing, because this guy was 68 years old, no dementia, top physical condition for somebody his age. Of course, he was military his entire career, and he just vanished. They said, the typical things that made it look like he took his binoculars and like hiking boots, and those disappeared from the house. So he must have just wandered off into the desert, that kind of a thing. And no doubt they'll probably find his body at some point, or who knows? Maybe they have disappeared him forever. These people, if they don't kill you, they lock you in a room and they throw away the room. They don't care about the key. So William Neal McCaslin has gone missing. And that brought up into my mind this week a bunch of past research that really came out in the ufology community, if you will, regarding the Mirage Men. And the Mirage Men are Air Force counterintelligence agents that are in charge of keeping secret the UFO reality on this planet. One of those agents, a man named Richard Doty, is now famous in the UFO community for having been personally responsible for the subsequent suicide that one of his operations was in charge of. And there is a great documentary out there in the world, and it's called Mirage Men. I highly recommend that people watch that documentary because you get to see Richard Doty himself. And now Richard Doty kind of makes his way through the ufology community as a believer and as somebody that is, he says he's a whistleblower, but with somebody that has those kind of connections, not many people in the ufology community have come around to actually trusting things that he says these days. But he freely admits that the operation that they conducted, which was a counterintelligence operation conducted on a well-known doctor. So this wasn't some tinfoil hat-wearing kook. This was a respected, well-known doctor in his community who thought that he had indisputable proof of the UFO reality, and Richard Doty and his crew of Mirage Men were tasked with getting him to go off the trail, as it were. Well, this led to a elaborate intelligence operation in which it eventually led to the doctor losing his family, losing his business, losing everything, and then committing suicide. So that's the dark part of paranormal research. And I thought that this week's discussion should include sort of the downside. We often talk about what the upside would be in paranormal research, but there's a lot of downside, and a lot of people involved in UFO and cryptozoology research see that downside a lot. And, there's a group there, they should be hailed as heroes for what they do, and there's not a lot of thank you going on in the world for those people. So let's put our hands together and thank all of them. So we don't know what the end result will be of the missing Major General, but it was clear that somebody who's 68, retired, living in Albuquerque, New Mexico, very near, I might add, to Linda Moulton Howe, may have been, let's say, tinkering with the idea of writing a book about what he knew, especially since President Trump just ordered the Pentagon to release any and all UFO information and files. That would trigger somebody like Protect into action, because they are working against all of that, and they may have just disappeared the poor Major General. So that's really how that comes about. This week has been interesting. We are on the upswing of the Kali Yuga. That should mean good things. I know that we have been going through an extremely turbulent period of time, but that was also predicted. Anytime that you go through the Kali Yuga on this planet, which is a planetary cycle, that really what it does is it infers that you come to a planetary position in the, our little solar system popping up and down, where we can actually get some of the energy coming from galactic center. And when that happens, good things occur on this planet and really all planets. We just happen to be on a kind of a backwater planet that's in a really unfortunate spot. And because of that, we go through downswings of the Kali Yuga, in which we don't get any galactic energy, and those are defined by dark ages in our past. Catastrophe, calamity, societal collapse, all of those things occur in the downswing of the Kali Yuga. So be glad you weren't born during that period. You are actually alive to at least see the beginning of the upswing of the Kali Yuga, and we're talking about extremely long time periods. Tens of thousands of years to go through this cycle. So you're only bound to see a little small portion of it because of our limited lifespans. Who knows? Maybe they'll crack the code and we'll all become immortal before death hunts us down, but we'll see, right? But the interesting thing about being in the upswing of the Kali Yuga is that's the period when humanity tends to go through golden ages. And I find it interesting that a lot of the verbiage being used by the current administration has to do with golden ages. It makes me wonder who's put that into their vernacular, but it's interesting timing, right? And we have the cyber prophecies, which really began with the Webbot and kind of steamrolled into Vedic astrology, the Schumann resonance indicators, premier remote viewing groups around the world doing exotic targeting. And when all of those various metrics, let's call them paranormal metrics, all peg in the same direction, then that gets my attention. And that gets the attention of the Paranormal Intelligence Agency. And we've always had a saying, once is chance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is a pattern. And a pattern always denotes intelligence. So that is really kind of what led us into the examination of the cyber prophecies. And if you're a fan of this show and have been listening, then you know that the beginning of the show always starts with where we are currently with the cyber prophecies. It appears as though we have begun to sort of phase into the period of time that the Webbot predicted its phrase, sci-fi world emerges. We have to remember that the Webbot speaks in phrases like that comes through a lot of filtering, and at its root, all you need to know is that the Webbot actually uses the collective psychic predictions of humanity through their language and speech patterns worldwide, to be able to correctly predict themes and things about to take place within this reality matrix. So what that implies is a lot of interesting things, right? First of all, for it to be correct, and it has been numerous times, then the thesis that humanity is collectively psychic also has to be true. So we can now kind of put that to rest, right? Collectively, as a species, we are psychic. Whether or not that's been stunted in some way is a matter of, historical examination and opinion. Many people believe a non-human intelligence kind of stunted our psychic growth in a lot of different ways. But collectively, as a species, we are psychic. And that also implies that on some basic level, we are a singular organism. So, don't be a hater of humanity, because really you're just hating yourself. If you think about it, that's really kind of how that works. We're all kind of connected in a way that makes us operate like a single entity on some level, and that level is the psychic level. This also shows up in the Schumann resonance indicators, and often when those indicators, and you can find that online, you can just have it up on your computer screen, but when those indicators peg, you know that some type of event in our reality matrix is about to manifest itself. And the last part of the show, by the way, which I didn't mention, we're going to get to the self-revealing ontology of the universe, because that's kind of going to wrap all of this together for us. But it's interesting that the cyber prophecies are occurring, or at least the more interesting ones are occurring during the upswing of the Kali Yuga. Sci-fi world emerges was always a major theme that it predicted, and at the same time it was predicting that a lot of the locked up black budget alien back engineered technology would eventually begin to trickle down into a space where the public at large would be able to benefit from it. And you might be right at that doorstep, right? With Trump saying Pentagon release everything, and you have people like Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, and Nancy Mace, and a few others out there that are doggedly tracking down any and every whistleblower they can find to help nudge all of this into the light. And this is all happening in a way that there has never been before. We've never had pro-UFO disclosure forces in the United States government so prominently positioned as we do right now. And interestingly enough, all of them are, largely are Republican. And yet there's still a few powerful Democrats that also are pro-UFO disclosure. And we have to remember that all of this whole ball of wax really got rolling through the efforts of Senator Harry Reid before he passed away. And he was a lifelong Democrat, right? So we have to kind of give credit in both directions. This might be one of those bipartisan issues that eventually they come to because they really can't budge in any direction on anything else, and maybe they cough up the goods on this one. That's a possibility, right? So McCaslin's gone. It's my guess that X-Protect got him. Who knows what's occurred between the delivery of all of that alien technology and bodies from those early UFO crashes to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where McCaslin was in charge, to now. Could it be that they've been moved elsewhere? That's also a strange possibility, but it is possible. And, maybe McCaslin's disappearance will lead people in our government who are going to be highly suspicious of this one down the pathway of eventually uncovering X-Protect and uncovering the reality of intelligence agents being embedded in the aerospace companies, which is highly dangerous. Highly, highly dangerous. And yet that's exactly what they did. So, we have been covering cryptocurrencies, precious metals, and unobtainium. That's a major prediction coming from multiple directions of the paranormal kind. And after it did have a bit of a sell-off today, but it's priced approximately at $77 an ounce currently. That's a steal when you consider that it's, a asset that has been predicted by numerous people, including mainstream people, not paranormal people even, but like mainstream financial analysts, etc., who are pointing at silver saying, yeah, this one's might be right. This one might go like a rocket ship. So it's possible. But, it's also possible it crashes back down to 50 and gives people an even better opportunity. Who knows? But the crypto markets are interesting right now because everything seems to be on pause for the Clarity Act. The Clarity Act is poised to be passed, but the problem right now is that the bankers, the banksters, as I like to refer to them, are kind of holding the whole thing up because they are mad that cryptocurrency exchanges can offer people yields on their money that rivals anything that these banks can offer by quite a bit. They're worried that they won't get that free money that they can just make money off of, like a magic trick, which is what they've been doing forever. And of course, they're going to fight that tooth and nail. Unfortunately for them, we're dealing with a president who is super pro crypto and whose sons are heavily involved in the crypto industry. And you have all kinds of pro crypto senators, congressmen at some point. My point being, some form or fashion of the Clarity Act will get passed. And when that happens, you're going to see I predict, and a lot of people predict, a vast inflow of investment kind of funds coming from, institutions that do that sort of thing. So you might be right on the cusp of that. I would add that some of these exchanges now offer derivative futures contracts on some of those precious metals and cryptos. And if I were a adventurous soul, and I am, but I'm just saying, if I were out there in the world and I was wondering how to, as Raoul Paul puts it, unscrew my future, I might look in that direction. Just saying. It's a very interesting thing that they're offering, and they're offering perpetual futures, meaning they never expire. Very interesting stuff. So, we will get back to that and Bigfoot and a lot more right after our break.
All right. Great job, Jack. You covered a whole lot. There you go.
Right. It all ties together.
Yep. Cecilia, welcome into the Kick Chat. Oh, yeah. All sorts of stuff going on, man. All the time now. Have you had any cryptid reports or anything out of Antarctica here lately?
No. Antarctica's like a black hole.
What's going on with that, though? You know, that's the thing. If they're not talking about it, there's something going on there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's first of all, it's highly likely they uncovered the Nazi base that's down there. That William or Admiral Byrd ran into when he went down there on Operation High Jump. But on top of that, they probably found some ancient alien ruins as well, is what it looks like.
Yeah. I was watching last night, what's his name? Hugh from Megalithomania? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he was on the Y-Files, and it was pretty interesting. He'd be another good guest if we could ever get him.
Oh, I'd love it.
Hugh Newman?
That'd be great.
Yep.
That'd be great. I'd like to get Scott Walter from America Unearthed.
Oh, yeah. Talk to Nancy. I think she knows Scott.
I would love to get him, because he's just over here in Minnesota, and I've actually conversed with him once before on a case he was working on.
Cool.
So,
up in the Four Corners area. In the Dakota Territories. I love that song, man. I'm so glad I made that. And have you been listening to it?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. He's
so
recording live.
My sister was laughing.
Really? Oh, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that one came out so super good. Yeah, I did one about the pell crawler too. You know, he's looking for your skin because he doesn't have a shape, so he's going to take yours. It's kind of a horror punk song, but it's kind of cool.
Right.
Night
funny.
of the Pell Crawler, it's called.
I like it. Sounds like a good movie.
Yeah, I made one just recently where Bigfoot and Dogman steal Harley Davidsons and race through Austin, called Werewolves of Austin. It's yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Werewolves of Austin.
Werewolves of Austin instead of London.
That's great.
It has a kind of a bluesy type sound to it, Stevie Ray style, So
Nice.
Yeah, that's Southern Fried Rock. Well, we got about 30 seconds, Jack.
Great.
Yep. Had a good show earlier. Did you catch any of it?
I did not. I literally ran in the door and then I was on the air, so I was gone most of the day today.
Okay, well, here's your countdown. 3, 2, 1, and you are live right now.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey. I've got a face for milk cartons and a voice for smell-o-vision. And tonight we're talking about, well, we've been discussing the cyber prophecies, the Kali Yuga, the missing Major General McCaslin, all of the secrets he may have known and who may have gotten to him. And, you know, we also are going to talk, we're going to transition a little bit here to the world of Bigfoot and cryptozoology. So it's interesting that we have a program really on the air that is, I believe, a CIA-run operation, and I'm talking about Expedition Bigfoot, where it looks to me as though they are truly attempting to bring about disclosure that these creatures do in fact exist and that they are here on the planet, that they are in our wilderness areas. That's quite a task that they've undertaken because, you know, let's face it, there's been a mountain of ridicule heaped upon the subject forever, and it seems as though people are kind of becoming more and more aware of the subject. I mean, I meet people all the time now that are aware of the subject and are interested in it in a way that wasn't like that for the past 20, 30 years. It just wasn't. Most people would just laugh it off and that be that. But today there seems to be kind of a genuine interest in our society, from normie land, everyday people that aren't necessarily involved in examining the paranormal world, but are still very much interested in the idea that these creatures could exist. And let's face it, there's been so much real evidence collected over the years. People are like, what evidence? Well, if you're in the Bigfoot community, you know the evidence. There's been plenty of really good quality video and pics and examinations by people like the online Bigfoot analyst, Thinker Thunker, who's actually a genius of an analyst and has been able to prove in video after video that the creature was real. And today you have AI, so that's going to be problematic for any paranormal research going forward if you're going to try to rely on video or photographic evidence as being your only evidence. You're going to have some kind of physical evidence other than video or photographs, which can be manipulated with artificial intelligence in a way that they could never before, and it was a problem before. So imagine how big of a problem it's going to be in the future, determining what's real from what's been generated easily from some type of app or program. So that we have that as kind of a downside to paranormal research right now. You have a few key researchers out there that are doing most of the quality field work. I would put the great genius Robert Kreider at the top of that list. But, and he's working out of New Mexico. For those of you that want to get a hold of him, you can find him on Facebook for sure. So, but the show Expedition Bigfoot, let's face it, one of the interviewers that goes out and interviews witnesses, it even says in his byline right below his name, former CIA operative. the head guy there, Bryce, is obvious. He's got CIA written all over him, you know. And they have a budget that dwarfs anything any cryptozoologist has ever been able to accumulate ever in history. These guys have apparently unlimited funding because of how they run their operations and the kind of technology they have access to on an ongoing basis, right? So it's interesting that you have that show at this period of time. The Bigfoot community itself is really sort of subdivided into various categories of believers that have come to believe for one reason or another through their examination of whatever evidence they've been able to expose themselves to, determine what the creature is, whether it's just another great ape, whether it's a half-human hybrid, whether it's interdimensional, whether it's what have you. There are various camps in the Bigfoot community these days that sort of champion one or the other of those ideas. And so it's interesting that now you have Expedition Bigfoot coming about, and really what it's doing is sort of like what happened to all the big hair bands of the 80s when Nirvana showed up. It's like wheat before the sickle, right? It's just like, and you just didn't see them again. They were just gone. It was like an atom bomb went off, and all that hairspray just went exploded, right? And all the big hair bands went down in flames in a single song, Smells Like Teen Spirit. It was over with for them. Toast, right? And that's really kind of how I view Expedition Bigfoot, because there is no way to compete with what those guys are doing, and that's not a scripted show. What you are seeing is the real deal, and I know it's the real deal because Robert Kreider is on the periphery involved in it, and he's as true and as real as the day is long, and would never be associated, if you do Robert Kreider, never be associated with anything that had any kind of falsehood or scripted whatever to it. And Russell Accord, the field tracker, the guy who's actually out in the field tracking these creatures for the show, actually utilizes handmade equipment from Kreider. I'm talking about parabolic type of equipment that is so finely tuned that it's really specifically made just for locating Bigfoot creatures. That's what we're talking about. This isn't some, albeit probably well-intentioned group of weekend warriors that go out to the same area time and time again and sleep all night long in their tents and look for prints and find them once in a while, and, is basically keeping the status quo of where Bigfoot research is right now. These guys are on a whole other league, a whole other realm, a whole other level, of magnitude up from there. When you can utilize heat, sensing drones coming from the most sophisticated companies that can deploy them, like 12 at a time, over vast areas of forests. Do you know how expensive that is? It's unbelievably expensive. And that's what they're doing. They're running artificial intelligence algorithms that tell them where to be and when to be there to have a Bigfoot encounter. It examines any and all known encounters that have been documented and then predicts when another encounter will take place at that exact location. I'm just saying, right? There's not much you could do to compete with that. So you're looking at I predict a nirvana moment for cryptozoology when it comes to the Bigfoot creatures. After, almost 30 years of actual field research, I can point you in the direction of a few key things that actually might end up proving the species to be real. Really, the key to finding Bigfoot is the cave systems. When you take a map of all the known, and I stress known, cave systems, and there are plenty that are unknown, and you overlay that with a map of all the credible Bigfoot sightings across the country, over 10,000, you have a spot-on match. When you sort of overlay that with indigenous lore telling you that these creatures live underground, that's an interesting thing. Then when you overlay those two maps with a map of the so-called 411 missing cases, they're a spot-on match. And in other words, the cave systems, the Bigfoot sightings, the missing people in the national park system are all a spot-on match. That can't be a coincidence. Once is chance, twice is coincidence, but 3 times, that's pattern, right? And what we have is a major pattern. And you can find all that information in my book, Bigfoot Unleashed. I even have those maps in the book showing you exactly what I'm talking about. So take a look at that. I was amazed. I actually ran into somebody the other day in a store who recognized me and had my book, Bigfoot Unleashed. Unbelievable. That's never happened to me my whole life. And I live in Nowheresville, South Dakota. So, very interesting. That kind of shows you the preponderance of Bigfoot in our human society, right? And here you have a creature that has, I believe, been responsible for missing people that go out picking wild berries in the spring. And there's been a number of those cases, and they are known as the berry picker cluster of cases. The berry picker cluster is something in paranormal research that not many people are aware of, but there is a very interesting set of disappearances that have occurred when people have gone out picking wild berries in the forest during the springtime. And I would offer that going out and picking one of the main food sources of a bipedal, 9-foot tall, 1,000-pound ferocious apex predator at the same time that they're there trying to feed is probably not the wisest choice of activities. That would just be my guess, given the number of missing people. And the same holds true, by the way, for mushroom pickers. So, these guys that go out into the deep woods and pick mushrooms, they end up disappearing all the time. It's amazing how many. Same thing with the ginseng pickers. Of course, they might be getting shot, but we don't really know. But, you know, if you're a ginsenger out in Appalachia, many of them have gone missing without a trace. So be very, very careful if you're involved in those kinds of activities. And I like to recommend that you never go into a wilderness area unarmed, ever. God forbid you run into a ferocious cryptozoological animal of some kind. Let's just say that would be the least of your worries if you ran into an evil human of some kind. Humans can be far, far more dangerous than any cryptozoological animal. And there are plenty of them out in the wilderness areas, and a lot of them, believe it or not, we have a population of feral humans living in the wilds of North America. It's not, you know, Bigfoot, and it's not another cryptozoological animal. They are feral humans. It's just a fact. And as evidence of that, I'll offer you in my mind, unarguable piece of evidence for that. And that is the fact that one of the researchers from the Bigfoot Conservatory Project out Big Thicket, as they call it, which is on the border of Texas and Louisiana, vast, vast wilderness with lots and lots of Bigfoot activity, right? They're in the wintertime. This guy is out there by himself, and he's tracking anything he can find. He's looking for areas where he might find some Bigfoot prints. And he walks up to a stream and he looks down, and there's a perfect human footprint with the toes still in the icy water. That's how fresh it was. And he was able to cast it because he thought, maybe it could be a Bigfoot. How weird, a perfect human print. Right? Got to be a Bigfoot print. Well, this print made its way all the way to the late Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who was an expert in Bigfoot prints, and it was determined to be a female human. There was a female human walking around the middle of the big thicket, barefoot in wintertime, and stepping through a frozen stream. Not only that, but we've got testimony from now 3 different deer hunters, not related to one another, and none of them knew each other, saying that they came across feral human beings in the wilderness. That's some scary stuff, guys. So be very, very careful when you're out there in the wild. Bigfoot's out there. You have these dogman creatures that are apparently roaming the same wilderness areas, and then you have feral human beings, which I can guarantee you can be extremely dangerous. In one of those encounters, the deer hunter actually was able to glass this guy with his binoculars. Happened at dusk. This guy apparently crawled up on hands and knees right behind a tree way off in the distance from the man's deer stand, and he began to make a call out that sounded just like a woman in distress. They were trying to get him down off that deer stand. That's some scary stuff. So be very, very careful when you're out there in the wilderness. And coming back around, that kind of ties all of this together, is the fact that the WebBot also predicts, not a lot about Bigfoot, if that's what you were thinking, but it does predict that humanity is entering a time period right now when we will begin to realize the self-revealing nature of the universe's ontology. In other words, there is a universal religion. There is a universal structure. There is some type of creative force that got that into being, and that it's a self-revealing force. In other words, it will, over time, reveal its true nature to the living creatures within it. What that means for us here on a lonely planet out in the middle of the Milky, way on the edge of the Milky Way galaxy, being blocked from our galactic center half the time by a big field of debris that we had nothing to do with, it means that we get lucky. It means that a self-revealing ontology comes with a lot of benefits. It means that secrets over time all become known, because the secrets began with it. And over time, it likes to reveal itself to the beings that reside within it. And that's exactly what is going to happen with most of the cryptozoology mysteries that are out there. And we have to remember that cryptozoology itself has entered into a whole new phase. We have to begin to separate planetary, earthly-based cryptozoology, which is very much a hard science, with interdimensional cryptozoology. What do we call that? What cool name can we come up with? I'm going to go with interdimensional exobiology. I like it. I like it a lot. It makes us sound very important. Interdimensional exobiology. I'm an interdimensional exobiologist, formerly a cryptozoologist, but since the Pentagon has got all of these scientists studying the fact that we have creatures coming into this dimension from other dimensions, and all of that's tied to Skinwalker Ranch, and all of this has been published in numerous books, including Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, which I talk about all the time. It all ties together, right? So why not interdimensional exobiologist? Because they do have exobiology right now is a thing, right? Like NASA has an on-staff exobiologist. This is somebody that theorizes what the biology of an alien would be like. So why not an interdimensional exobiologist? I like it. We can actually wear the white cloak and everything. That'll be cool. But
Jack, do we get foil hats if I take and join?
I
want
think
a
so.
foil
I
hat.
think
I want a foil hat if you're going to do that.
Well, I think the foil hat has gotten a bad rap. No pun intended, but I think it actually might benefit in some way. Like it could repel stuff. I don't know. I'm going to do some experimentation next time I'm in the field. I like it. I'm going to come up with a line of tinfoil hats. That's what I'm going to do. You can collect my line of tinfoil hats. But anyway, be sure and check out my many paranormal books on Amazon. If any of the subjects that I cover interest you, you're bound to find one that you will like. The big seller right now is Alien Ocean. I guess people are waking up to the idea that there is a vast alien civilization that is positioned in the world's oceans. And we're talking cities. We're not talking craft just sitting down there in the bottom of the waves. We're talking big time civilization. And it could be, here's the weird part, that civilization may have originated on this planet. Ooh-wee. That's the topic of next week's show. And until then, you'll have to wonder what I'm talking about. But a careful examination of ancient lore around the world kind of leads us in that direction. And we're going to be talking about that next week. Stay tuned for some more quality programming. And until then, I will see you on the radio.